On an ordinary evening, Tel Ivan was lively and pleasant. The collection of longhouses and yurts within its tall brick walls shone bright with kerosene, not just torches, real kerosene, and its communal meeting area was noisy with conversation and song. The children would be playing their games, and on the eves of holy days, the lore keepers would chant their stories of the lost world, accompanied by lyres and the town's one decaying guitar. Tonight, though, a pall lay on Tel Ivan. The 6 gates of its tall brick walls were barred and shut, and foreboding warriors dressed in odd combinations of Kevlar and steel armor stood just within them, brandishing their swords. Families locked themselves in their yurts and longhouses, huddled around little kerosene lanterns. In the temple, the priests knelt before the stone idols of Saint Christ and Saint Mahomet, chanting plaintive prayers for protection. "I still don't understand," Michael Dorn complained from inside the longest longhouse. "What this is all about. None of the wildlings are anywhere nearby. I should know. I've come through 200 miles of forest to get here, and the only 3 towns in this area are at peace with you. In Great Rabada, even an impending attack couldn't make us cower inside like this. If I had half a mind to think there's something you're not telling me, Finn, something that might threaten our deal." Finn Larissus, chief lorekeeper for Tel Ivan, sighed. "Nothing that would threaten our deal, my Khal. Great Rabada has gold. We have sun blessings. Just stay here long enough for our bankers to figure out the price, and you'll have timers and mathers and lighters of your very own." My Khal glanced longingly at the chief lorekeeper's own sun blessing, a timer that stood on the shelf of his private room. 1:52 a.m. gleamed on its face, with a maddeningly smooth red glow unlike the sunlight or moonlight or firelight. Yet my Khal knew it was sunlight or something like. He was the lorekeeper of Great Rabada. The lorekeepers of Tel Ivan were far wiser than he. How could they not be with the town's close proximity to ruined Dideroi and its trove of artifacts from the Lost World? But even he knew how sun blessings worked. You took them outside, and the blue tiles on their surface fed on sunlight. Then they worked various miracles. Timers would tell you the time far more precisely than any sundial, invaluable in keeping the schedule of sacred prayer decreed by Saint Mahomet. Mathers would add and subtract quantities more quickly than the fastest savant. Lighters would shine at night without wood or kerosene. My Khal had no doubt that the lorekeepers of Tel Ivan, the wisest on the Great Peninsula, knew of still other sun blessings, ones that mighty but lore-deficient Great Rabada had never heard of. He himself would be happy with anything, even the meanest timer. Of all the millions of wonders built by the Lost World, only the sun blessings still worked, and they were in fiendishly short supply. While lore-rich Tel Ivan had a timer upon each of its 6 gates, Great Rabada, for all its bountiful gold and grain, had not a single sun blessing to call its own. As its lorekeeper, it would aid his status immensely if this trade mission was successful, and he could bring something back to demonstrate the power of the Lost World and, incidentally, his own importance as keeper of its lore. But even his greed for power did not override his concern for his own safety. "I'm serious, Finn. I want to know what's going on. I can't deal with a city that won't even tell me why it's on high alert." Finn Larissus, chief lorekeeper of Tel Ivan, and wisest in ancient matters on the whole Great Peninsula, gave another sigh.
"If you were not a lorekeeper yourself, I would not share such secrets with a foreigner. But if it threatens the deal, very well. Only know that you will be no happier with this knowledge, and that you may not sleep quite as soundly on autumn nights from now on."
My Khal gave a nod, indicating he wanted the old man to continue.
In Great Rabada you have no sun blessings, and so you must keep the time like wildlings by watching the course of the sun. Here in Tel Ivon we have 6 timers, one on each of the city gates. And so everyone down to the meanest peasant knows the time down to the second. To most, they check the time when they enter the city, and the time when they leave the city, and they never think any more of it. We lore keepers are more astute, but not infinitely so. And so it was only 40 years ago, in the time when my uncle Derek was chief lore keeper, that we noticed that there is something wrong with time. The stars, he continued, sometimes match the time as told by the timers, and sometimes they do not. At first we thought the flaw was in the heavens themselves, so perfect are the devices of the lost world. But this so discomfited my uncle that for 3 months he sat in front of this very timer, handing it off to an acolyte only when he slept. And one night, his watch bore fruit.
"What happened?" asked Michael breathlessly.
Time moved backwards,
said Finn. "Impossible," said Michael.
It was on this very night,
said Finn.
Time, which 364 days of the year moves only in one direction, suddenly jumped backwards, and you yourself will witness it.
He pointed to the timer on his shelf, which now read 1:59 a.m. Its red glow suddenly looked unfriendly, even eerie. Even though Michael knew it had to be sunlight at its root, it held none of the wholesomeness of the sun. And then it changed. 1:59 turned to 1. Michael gasped, and his fingers instantly formed the cross of Saint Jesus, and then the crescent of Saint Mahomet. "Madness," he whispered.
Something,
said Finn,
is wrong with the night. It is not always this night. It can come as early as 3 days before, or as late as 3 days after. My uncle worked out the formula after several years, but every year it happens. Time jumps backwards.
"But why?" asked Michael. "Why would the gods do such a thing? Why would they break the symmetry of the true time and the heavens?"
"That's the worst part,"
said Finn.
"When I was younger, I looked over my uncle's formula, the one for calculating the day when the time skip would happen, and found what he had missed. The day of the time skip is fixed to the 7-day calendar of the lost world. To the ancients, it would always occur on the same day of the week, Sunday, their holy day."
Michael felt his blood run cold. "That's some coincidence."
"Perhaps,"
said Finn.
"But I don't think it is a coincidence. The gods are just. They would not play with time as children play with blocks, picking one up here, then putting it down far away. I think the ancients of the lost world, the ones who could build the great glass towers, the ones who manufactured sun blessings, the ones who made Dideroi that was, I think they took their magic and threw it against time, and broke it. I think they wanted to become lords of time itself."
"But they failed," guessed Michael.
"They created a single hour,"
said Finn.
"of the 9,000 hours in a year. All but one were made by the gods. But one was made by man. What stopped them from creating more? From creating an infinite number of hours? From becoming immortal by arresting the progression of time? We will never know. But it is my belief that when they saw what men had done, the gods stopped them before they could do worse. Michael, I believe that is how the Lost World ended. A last-ditch effort by the gods to save time itself from the hubris of man.
Michael was silent. For all their wisdom, none of the lore keepers claimed to know how the Lost World ended. Surely the gods had pulverized it for some offense. But what sin could have been so dire as to doom those magnificent glass towers, those great black roads as smooth as water? Michael looked at the clock, gleaming 1:03 a.m., and knew in his heart that Finn was right.
There is a day in the very early springtime,
said Finn,
when an hour disappears. The gods are stingy. They would not grant the ancients their victory. What they did with that hour in springtime I do not know, but their message is clear.
Michael shuddered again. Like all the inhabitants of Great Rabada, he had told the time with the sun and the stars. But it had always been an approximation, not the to-the-second true time displayed on the 6 gates of Tal Ivan. And so, in their ignorance, they had missed no fewer than 2 violations of time, and it had fallen to the people of Tal Ivan alone to guard these terrible secrets.
You ask why we extinguish our fires and pray this night. 9,000 hours in the year were made by the gods, but 1 was made by man. I cannot help but wonder what walks abroad during the hour no god has made. I cannot help but wonder what spirits awake on the anniversary of the old world's death, when time itself stands stagnant. What sorts of things breed within it? I prefer not to think about such things. That is why, for the past 40 years, ever since my discovery, I have knelt with the priests in the temple and joined in their prayers. With an honored guest such as yourself here, I thought to entertain you instead, to avoid worrying you. Now I see that thought was in vain. Will you come to the temple and pray with me?
And so, on the longest night of the year, Finn Larissus, chief lorekeeper of Tal Ivan, and Michael Dorn, lorekeeper of Great Rabada, knelt in the temple and prayed to Saint Jesus and Saint Mahomet that time continue, that 1:59 a.m. be followed by 2 a.m., just as it always had in the past, and that the people be forgiven the sins of the lost world, which had dared to change time itself. And lo, in the appointed hour, the 6 clocks on the 6 gates of Tal Ivan showed 2 a.m., and the people rejoiced, and the kerosene lights were lit, and the city of Tal Ivan was lively and pleasant once again. 3 days later, Michael Dorn left Tal Ivan, minus the gold he had brought, but with a sun blessing of his own, a beautiful slate-gray mather that would have the engineers of Great Rabada dancing with glee. They had offered him a timer instead, a beautiful digital timer that even played short tunes at different hours, but Michael had refused. He bore a secret that need not trouble the people of Great Rabada. They would have a mather and calculate things lightning quick, and never know that there was a flaw in time that even the gods themselves could not resolve. But until the day he died, every so often on chill autumn nights, Michael Dorn would look up at the stars and shudder.